what you were feeling, and when did we know? I recall a crowded
It's sort of disarming to say that you don't know what you're doing. But the song itself is that I'm reminiscing on the phase one of the relationship with my wife, when we first met in Italy, in Milan, and at that time I was kind of single and partying my way around the world, and I sort of thought to myself, well, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I think it just stemmed from there. And then I just start to remember how we met, and then I kind of lost touch and couldn't find her, and then found her again, and so it was very much connected with that. Well, this is a funny old track, Just Like You, because I said to myself, well, it would be great to have like a kind of an instrumental like track that featured the band playing more. And I remember walking into my bedroom and just saying, I want a really good bass line. It just would be great to have a funky bass line. And I had my phone with me, and I just pressed record and just sang that bass line pretty much as it was into my phone. What's funny is that Just Like You Part 2 is really Part 1. It was that was how the song was originally conceived, was to be more instrumental than vocal. But as I started working on the song more, I ended up writing the bridges and then that chorus, and then before I knew it, I had really a song that was not my intention. It just kind of happened because of Part 2. So Part 2 is kind of Part 1 actually, but it belongs on the second half of the album where it was originally intended. But then I came up with a kind of more of a structured song because of Part 2, if that makes any sense. But that's how it came about. Let Your Hair Down is it has a connection with the other song, Shades 22, in that both of those tracks come from a song that was written several years before. I had a song that was never released called Long Black Hair, and it was almost like a rock and roll song. And Andy said to me, that song, I want to do something with it that it's nothing like that version. And I said, okay, go ahead. The baby you know more than you show. That's from years ago. So that's kind of how that song came about. It Wouldn't Be Me is actually a story. I don't write stories very often, but the story is about a girl who has been trafficked. She escapes and she runs off and hides out of town, and she doesn't want anybody to know about her past. So she meets a guy, and this guy, the narrator of the song, has fallen head over heels for this girl, but she won't commit, and he doesn't quite understand, and he's not going to give up because he doesn't quite understand what's wrong. He knows that she likes him, but for some reason she won't give, and it's because she's hiding her past. And in the bridge it says of what she used to be. She's scared of what she used to be. She's scared of him finding out. But what she doesn't know, he already knows, but he doesn't care. He still loves her, and he's not going to give up until she realizes that he really loves her. And that's kind of what that song's about. I was at a funeral of a friend of mine who's actually a man, but for some reason I wrote the song from the idea of a matriarch, and I envisaged being at a kind of a funeral, and everybody's kind of gathered around, the grandchildren, the aunts and uncles and everybody, paying homage to this lady that meant a great deal to them. If you're an author or a lyricist or a songwriter or a poet, how can you not be affected by what's going on around you? I can't help feeling that everything that represents who we are is under threat. You know, I'm wondering, have we been doing this too long? You know, have we taken our freedoms for granted? You get the sense that somehow everything's kind of crumbling around you. And I'm like wondering to myself, well, where are we going to go with this? Are we going to let this fall apart? Or are we going to have to sort of like try and protect it? I almost envisage myself sat by a pond on a stool, you know, with like a one-man band singing around. You know, the slapping in the middle of love, you know, a bit like that. Like I could play it on a street corner, and it's got like that little bit of old rhythm and blues, kind of rock and roll flavour to it, and it, you know, I would describe it as a bit of a novelty record somehow. It's got that kind of flavour to it. It's just kind of good time. I had that riff, the down, the down, the down, down. I had that riff and a rough kind of arrangement of the song. But I have to give credit to Andy Wright, my producer. A lot of the sound and the textures really boil down to Andy. Well, Butterflies is an interesting song. And it's interesting because I originally wrote the song for Cyndi Lauper, who's a friend of mine. And the concept of it when I gave it to Cyn was that it was actually a bit like a rock and roll record from Grease, from the movie Grease. Because, you know, Cyn's got that kind of sassy kind of rock chick thing about her, you know. So the original version is like, well, she's the one for me because she makes me believe in love. Yeah, she's cool with her daddy and she's all I'm thinking of. But what happened was, Cyn tried it and she didn't like the vocal on it. She didn't like her vocal. We liked the vocal, but she didn't like it. And then, for whatever reasons, with lockdown and all this mess, and she was having to write songs on Broadway, we just didn't get around to doing it. So then I had a chat with Andy, and I made the decision that I wanted to do a 12-track album, not 10. And so he started suggesting things, and he said, well, why don't you try and do something with the song Butterflies? And I said, well, I don't really, that was more for Cyndi, but if I was going to do it, how would I do it? And then I started singing it a cappella, and I said I'd probably take the key down and I'd slow it down, you know, and be like more like a kind of a jazzy thing. Well, she's the one for me, that she makes me believe in love. So then I sang this a cappella, and then Andy took it away, and then he put instrumentation to the a cappella version. So that's how that came about. The first song I wrote was actually the last track on the album, which is called Earth in a Lonely Space. And that was the criteria of every song I wrote, was that I had to aim for my interpretation of excellence. I had to really push myself and make something that identified with who I actually am.